So I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Eric Fowler. For those of you who haven't joined these webcasts before, um, a couple housekeeping notes. If you have questions, please use the Q&A box. I'll be reading those throughout this webcast, and there's a chance that we might save some of them to the end, depending on how relevant it is to what we're talking about. But I wanted to introduce Dr. Chris White. Thanks for wrapping a year of pretty awesome and successful webcasts. I think it's very fitting for us to have a conversation today and kind of talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of what 2020 was.
Great, thank you.
We'll get to some of the nitty gritty in a couple slides coming up, but we've done a lot of digital engagement this year. I think you and I have probably done 3 of these so far this year, and there's been, average probably about 2 a month that we've broadcast. So if anybody's interested in what the past webcasts are, feel free to check out our YouTube channel. They all are recorded and free to view later. But we really want to give a shout out and a thank you to everybody that's calling in today or has in the past, all of our partners, beer nerds, science lovers, and friends and family. You guys are all the reason that we do what we do. It's why we come to work every day. It's why we're passionate about what we do, and it's what drives us to move into 2021 with such a positive attitude. So Chris, a lot's happened this year. Everybody's tired of hearing the word pivot. Everybody's tired of being on Zoom calls like this. But engagement's been very difficult, but not only engagement, but just daily operations, right? It's been physically challenging to come into some offices, some production facilities with all of the circumstances going on and all the continuously changing regulations. What's been your take on just making it to December? Where was your mind in January of this year, and where are you now?
Well, thanks, Eric. Hello, everybody from San Diego. It's been a strange year for everybody. Everybody listening, everybody's different jobs, everybody's different goals. For us, it's very similar in that we started January, very optimistically, and some things were going great. Yeast production, the brewery was doing good, the tap rooms, all sorts of stuff. Well, this virus hit the world, so we're doing what everybody else is, and kind of hunkering down, working with our groups. I stayed in San Diego almost the whole time. I was able to get to our Asheville facility once recently, and Copenhagen not at all, which is really unusual. But I really, it ended up being pretty nice, actually. Working with the people here in San Diego every day and seeing the teamwork that came together. In some ways, it's been actually really awesome. And that might sound strange to say, but it's, from what I've seen and how this company and other people are working, it's been really amazing.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting challenges is we're a very boots on the ground company. We like being at breweries. We like going to trade shows. As you said, you like traveling, but it's difficult to express your identity and get that energy out when you don't have the ability to do that. So I think what we've seen is a lot of that kind of turned inward and really re-looking at what makes us so successful and what drives us. You've had some good conversations with you over the last couple months of just being wowed by the dedication of the crew coming in at 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah, and it's been a lot of fun to come in and see that crew before dawn, as it's dark and cold, and the brewery gets fired up to make the first of several batches of wort for yeast. The harvest of the yeast that starts at that time, and the lab getting going to take the samples and do the final analysis, and just the dedication of the crews. So for me, that was mostly San Diego. Like I said, it was only once in Asheville, but they're doing the same, and Copenhagen's doing the same. I just didn't get to observe it, but everybody's been and just dedicated, and also being a team, working together through the various restrictions that have been put in place with trying to prevent the spread of COVID. So, everything, especially in the state of California, it's we're in another lockdown, and it's kind of continued to happen, and everybody's really reacted great here, and really focused on just what we do, making great yeast, doing the other things in the company that we do, working in teams, and just like other people listening in different companies, you probably had similar situations. We had so much positivity come out of it from our teams and from the teamwork that people are doing. It's been really impressive to me, and everything we've asked, it's kind of the management sort of, hey, we need to do this, we need to do this, let's be safe here, let's wear masks right in the beginning, let's do all of these things, and everybody responded 100% in.
So do you think there was some advantages of, being a manufacturer that's used to working aseptically and, having some of those protocols in place? Or do you think that we've had the same challenges as everybody else in the world or in manufacturing in general?
We had some advantages, and I think some breweries as well, where we're working in a microbiology environment. A big part of the company works with masks and alcohol and gloves and things every day. So spreading that throughout everybody, whether you're in finance or in shipping and warehouse and things like that, wasn't as difficult, because we had such a protocol already for so much of the company in terms of who was making yeast and moving yeast around. So maybe that gave us a little bit of advantage, and procuring those PPE materials was maybe a bit easier, but nobody was resistant. All these other little, and of course a lot of people have been working at home and are still working at home that don't need to be here, but everybody's been great. In just saying, okay, this is what we need to do. This is how it's going to be. And we'll just be patient, and this will go away at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, this being a pandemic that's affected everybody globally this year, we're a global company, and some of the challenges that we've seen over the years have maybe impacted specific facilities or specific regions, right? Every winter you get a couple big storms that come in, or maybe some tropical storms towards the end of summer, and that might shut down and be challenging for certain regions of the US. How do you think all of our facilities working together and all of our partner breweries and partner customers have been impacted differently because of this? And then how do you think the way that White Labs has grown over time has benefited our stability over the last couple months?
Yeah, that definitely has turned into an advantage, Eric, by having a facility in California, having a facility in North Carolina, having a facility in Denmark. These regions of all the globe has been impacted by COVID. This virus has spread throughout the world, and each country reacts differently. In the United States, it's even more complicated because 50 states react differently. And so you're right that, we see these things happen all the time in places, different natural disasters or storms or whatever, but this is such a global thing that it's been nice to have 3 facilities that allow us, if something has to shut down, we've had no transmissions of COVID at White Labs, which has been great in any of the facilities, but people have symptoms and have to be home. People have, things happen, and and states regulations have changed things. So it's been, in hindsight, it's something that, we invested in to have these different facilities has really helped in different communities. and it's allowed us to continue production at fairly similar levels to 2019.
So you've seen our facilities, across the globe still pumping out a lot of yeast and a lot of demand. People are still looking for fresh quality yeast in a timely manner.
Yeah, I think so, because home brewers are brewing more. Commercial breweries are totally dependent on where they are, what country they are, maybe what state they are, what province they are, etc. How they're open or not open, and whether there's a distribution or relying on a tap room or draft beer. Asia, of course, has its own differences as well, and where it started in China, it's also expanded, as we said, around the world. But Asia has done a pretty great job at containing the spread, and I think the West can learn a lot from that. Masks are a big part of that. That's why I say that we have little advantage maybe at White Labs already being used to that. Also, as a company that has a White Labs Analytical Lab does a lot of testing on beers. And I think testing is one thing that was talked about a lot in the beginning, but really Asia really, I think, it did the best at implementing large scale testing. Masks and testing really reduced the spread of and the pandemic, and the United States for sure has not understood that. I don't know why. We focus on positivity rates, which means nothing. It's just how many people are positive. Who cares how many people you test? The more you test, the more the businesses can stay open, actually. So that's been a little bit frustrating, and I don't think that's going to change. But you can see it's not a theory. You can see the success at the countries and places that have implemented massive testing, and that creates jobs and industry and all sorts of other things, and keeps the economy open. But I've been talking about that for a year, and I guess it doesn't make any difference. So the United States is going to wait for a vaccine
Soon.
Yeah.
And I think what a lot of this situation has done and continues to emphasize is the importance of supporting local, right? We went from, a large distribution, especially when we're talking about fermented beverages, and you're still seeing a lot of it, but it's really the local customers that are really trying to support and keep these businesses operating. What's difficult, here in San Diego with all the shutdowns and reopening every other day or every other week has been very difficult. But, craft beer has always kind of been a pretty localized industry. People are proud of the brewery down the street. That's where they want to go. That's where they hang out. That's where you celebrate a birthday, where you celebrate a baby shower. What has been your experience, with very limited traveling, on how people are choosing to spend their money and how different breweries or cideries and meaderies are maybe capturing that differently now than they would have been at the beginning of this year?
Well, I think the breweries themselves have really shown a lot of patience, and that's great. And patience is needed in business anyway. Consumers have really shown a lot of loyalty to the craft breweries and local restaurants and craft breweries that are also local restaurants, and helping to support them. I'm going to one local brewery after this just to work on some things. And so we can still get together a little bit to do some technical things. And certainly consumers are going for to-go beer. They're going for to-go food, which was not a big thing, in the United States. And eating outside, which for whatever reason is not a big deal in San Diego, even though the weather's good here. People living here always joke about that. Like, why don't we eat outdoors more? During COVID, we did, but now it got shut down again. So, patience, perseverance. I'm actually really optimistic. I think we're in the middle of this still, and breweries are still having a tough time, but they're gonna be fine when things open up again, as long as they've been careful, because consumers will come back. I think a lot of people will say, hey, I want to start a brewery. I've been home brewing more, or hey, maybe I lost my job. And, craft brewing has always been that really fun, exciting industry that you can start as a little business. And I think we're going to see, starting in 21 and beyond, more people wanting to start a brewery.
That would be awesome. As I was kind of nodding to when we started talking a couple minutes ago, is we've been a very out boots on the ground company, and we enjoy throwing parties, and we enjoy visiting our customers and spending a lot of time and hanging out with our partner suppliers. And this year's been a challenge for that. So we've been able to, still keep present and enjoy everybody's company, but it's been virtual. I think if this current situation would have happened, 5, even 10, even 5 years ago, there would have been a struggle for that engagement. But with technology and being able to, I'm sure a lot of people on this call today are on their phone, right? Probably just have an ear pod in and they're going about their normal day, just listening. So the access to experts and the access to information and the access just to engagement and entertainment has become so easy. The picture up here on the right was in February, which feels like a lifetime ago, up at Reuben's Brew in Seattle. We did 2 classes back to back up there for a bunch of brewers, and it was a great time, and it was cool to partner with that. But that hasn't stopped. It just looks a little bit different now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I love this industry. I have so much fun in the brewing industry, and I love yeast, and that's why I got into it. I've really enjoyed the last number of years getting to so many different breweries and conferences and homebrew events and talking to people. And so I didn't know what to expect from a year like this, but I've had a lot of fun being in White Labs, working with people here every day, doing Zoom things like this and doing educational things and different Zoom meetings and things. So it's been, to me, a different side of the industry, trying to do it from the office. But I love the people here, and I love hanging out at White Labs. Even when I'm traveling out, when I'm in San Diego, I'm in my office all the time because it's great. It's an exciting company. We've got a lot of innovation going on, and we've got a lot of things to teach and talk about. So that's kind of what I was saying earlier, and it may sound kind of surprising, but I think in a lot of ways it's been a really enjoyable year from a company perspective, and we know we're going to get out of this.
Yeah, we've definitely been able to work on a lot of passion projects, right? One of the projects that I've been most excited about is launching or revitalizing our YouTube channel. We knew we needed other ways of engaging people. We had a little bit more time because we weren't traveling, we weren't speaking at these conferences and at these trade shows, monthly. So we were able to, show what we love doing. Like I personally haven't homebrewed much over the last 6-7 years, but this year I've probably brewed 6 batches, which is more than I've done in a long time. But what's been cool is being able to throw some of that up on the YouTube channel and share that with people. Whereas usually we might have a homebrew club come down and brew up a batch and share a beer after. And instead we've been pretty proactive in creating new, unique ways of sharing that with people. I'll kind of let you touch on some of the other things we've done. I mean, we have a long laundry list of what we've been working on this year and what we've kind of completed and put out there, and some other things that are in the works for next year. But maybe you could touch on some of the highlights that you've been most excited about that has come out with because of some of this downtime we've had to work on new things.
Yeah, for a company that's been growing for 25 years, that takes a lot of energy focus to expand equipment, to expand facilities, to hire new people. And that put us in a very good position, as you mentioned, going into this. But when you decide that, okay, this is not a year for that kind of growth, let's work on all these things that we want to work on. And one of the most enjoyable things that White Labs does, from my perspective, is this little week thing that we do internally. We call it Innovation Summit, and we get a lot of people. It's open to anybody at White Labs to provide to do these proposals, and we go somewhere and we work on it for a week. Well, this whole year has been the Innovation Summit because we've just been doing that all year long. And so a lot of these are not new ideas that we started working on in 2020. They're ideas that have come over the last number of years that we've been able to focus on, like canning. Okay, we have a brewery since 2012. We have 2 tap rooms. Let's can the beer and let's be able to ship it with it. Unfortunately, in the United States, the restrictions are still a little bit complicated with where you can ship alcohol, but at least we can ship them in the state of California and the state of North Carolina, and have some fun with the beer names and the idea that we make a beer and put it in a smaller fermenters with different yeast strains. So it's the exact same beer with different yeast strains, and that's been the fun of the tap rooms. But now we can do a mixed 4-pack of these 16-ounce cans. That's a hazy beer that we did recently, Better Haze Ahead. We're almost out of it now with 2 different yeast strains. And so it's 2 cans of each in a 4-pack. And that's, we're going to do another canning run on Friday. And so we're doing more of these canning runs. And that was an example of people getting together, working on a team. It's all been this team approach this year. It's a kind of a change for innovation from us. Usually we would have somebody like lead a project. Now we created teams, and we've got a whole system around it that we actually started at the end of last year, based around some improvements we're doing to our yeast. But we were able to deploy that into things like cans, all sorts of other things we might talk about. But it's one example that we were able to, within 4 weeks, say, okay, let's, a little bit more time than that, but let's can these beers. Let's be able to share these beers with different yeast strains outside of our tasting rooms. And the San Diego tasting room has been closed most of the year anyway. So while Asheville has been more open and the state of North Carolina has been more open to visitors, but at least it's allowed us to do something with the beers that we're making and create something for the future. This isn't just a COVID thing. This is something we're able to do now, and White Labs will can forever now and be able to share these beers. We also worked on nutrients. Hard seltzers became a big thing recently, and so we were able to spend some time really formulating a great nutrient with a team, internal team at White Labs, with local breweries too that were making hard seltzers, lots of beta work, and make a nutrient that was great for water, and that's quite different than wort. And we have about 20 of these things and another 20 that are still ongoing, releasing into 2021.
Yeah, it's been a crazy year, but being able to look back, as we're getting closer to Christmas and the New Year, it's been astounding, I think, on everything that's kind of wrapped up and everything that's still in the works. I know the can is a very exciting one because that's something easy to share with people, right? When you can't have a beer and invite somebody out to try it, being able to share and bring that experience to them has still been really cool. But, there's mentioning the nutrients, I think that's been one of the projects that I've been most personally impressed with because, we've been doing R&D on different yeast nutrients for a long time. And when seltzer started becoming popular, we'd run through sensory panel, trial after trial after trial, and I was like, these aren't very good. There's
Right.
a lot of sulfur, or the quantity we're putting in, you can start tasting the nutrient. But then finally honing in, once the R&D department came with another sample, I said, what's different about this one? This is awesome. This tastes exactly as it should, which ended up becoming Seltzer Max. And it's been cool to get feedback from customers since launching that on quicker fermentation times and cleaner end products and how well it works. I think it's always kind of cool to see, again, doubling down and using the time we have allocated to us to come up with something that solves a pretty tangible problem.
Right, because the hard seltzers came on so strong, so fast, but also breweries in most states in the United States are able to make them, which took a lot of people by surprise because it doesn't have any malt really, right? And so, but the authorities were kind of like, what do we do with this? Okay, breweries can make it. So it's a nice opportunity for breweries also. It's not just water or hard seltzer, right? They're made in craft breweries. But a lot of people came to us originally, homebrewers and everybody, pro brewers, saying, hey, this brewer's yeast is not working. Nothing's happening. I need a distiller's yeast. And the truth there is it's nothing wrong with brewer's yeast. Brewer's yeast is some of the best fermentation yeast on the planet because of its collection, because of its flavors. It's not the brewer's yeast. It's the nutrient value in the water, right? So as long as you solve the nutrient part, you can use a brewer's yeast. You can use, distilling yeast struggle in water too. Other yeast struggle in water. They'll do okay, maybe better than brewer's yeast, but you need the nutrient part balanced. You need amino acids. You need zinc and phosphorus, and you need these elements that are already so plentiful in wort. And so people started going to some things like some of the turbo yeasts and things like that. But those were made for fuel ethanol, the urea in them. You don't want your yeast smelling like pee. So formulating a nutrient that doesn't add a lot of off flavors to the seltzer, but still gives the ability for that fermentation to happen fast was really key to developing a good nutrient.
Yeah. And I think, it's important to know what the yeast need, and then more importantly, what that balance is to produce something that tastes good too, because at the end of the day, you want the yeast to be happy, but we want to enjoy what we're drinking too. So,
Yeah.
We also, like, some of the other cool strains that have been released this year is a heavier emphasis on Kvike strains, right? We've had 518 Opshag Kvike ale yeast for not that long in the grand scheme of things, but a little bit longer, and we kept seeing more and more demand for more Kvike strains in our catalog. I don't know if you can speak to some of those other strains at all. We've got 519 Stronda, 520 Sigmund, 521 Horndal. But I had an awesome time taking a pitch of each of those home and brewing different styles with each, and seeing how variable they actually are when it comes to different beer styles.
Yeah, those three Kvike strains were 3 of the 8 new strains we released this year, and 3 of the 8 being Kvike is a really good indication of, hey, people really are interested in Kvike strains, and the fact that they can ferment faster at higher temperatures, but also be fairly clean, is really like kind of shocking from a yeast world. Like, wow, there's strains that people are using that people didn't know about, right, in parts of the world, and then helping to kind of allow more people to use them. And I think there'll be more and more strains. And one thing that we had done that helped that in the past is we have this core strains, and we make 80 strains a week. Imagine if a brewery made 80 different beers every week to a certain amount, right? So that's a little bit of pressure that White Labs has. We have these 80 strains that we make in this core group. And so we created this vault specialty strain segment where we can just release strains much faster, put them in vault. So that's allowed us to release these 8. What we're not great at is getting that distribution of these vault strains around the world. And so we're working on that in another one of these teams. Vault, every week we're talking about how can we, okay, it's great. We got the specialty channel for yeast strains and developing new yeast strains. How can we make them more available? Because the core has the logistics figured out, and the stores know what to order and things like that. Some stores tell us, well, we don't want to order vault strains because you don't have them all the time. So those are some of the challenges we're working with through these specialty releases. But we will solve those complexities because it's a way we can get new strains out to people who want to use them really quickly.
Yeah, it's been cool. I mean, there's, logistically speaking, it is hard to have 4 Kvike strains that are always available, but it doesn't mean that we're not passionate about those strains or that they're not awesome for certain beer styles, right? It's just uh, it's a great tool in a way to give people access to those strains, whereas they could just sit in our yeast bank and not go anywhere. But being able to make it accessible through small batch production, through spontaneous and scheduled seasonal releases, has been pretty awesome. Um, one word that we like to use a lot internally, which is probably pretty obvious, is quality. Most things we do focus around quality, and we generally think in the very traditional sense of, our QA/QC programs and looking at our yeast and looking at our beer and making things consistent. But I think, some of the more fun projects that we have too, uh, it's still a word that resonates, whether it's improving some of the guest experiences when we reopen, whether it's doing these R&D projects, whether it's working on some of the upcoming strains to be released. It's a word that we use often. Can you touch a little bit on some of the projects that we've done this year that relate to quality, maybe in a very literal traditional sense, and then as a bigger picture?
Yeah, and that's rolled into all of these teams. We've worked on about 30 of them. 10 are about done, 20 still going. I got another 33 I want to do. And Eric knows a lot of the managers are saying, please, Chris, these are so many meetings, but hey, this is the time to do it. Because in meetings we develop, it's just talking, right? We're developing these things. And Eric mentioned a couple of those, but a couple things that we're still working on is a new qPCR method. So qPCR is also called real-time PCR, and we do that every day here too. We have machines to do that, but we're creating an assay and collaboration that we can use on, within the industry, within every yeast culture, to detect wild yeast and bacteria from a PCR method. That's exciting because it uses really current, it moves beyond plating, and plating's great. Plating captures a lot of the culture, but PCR gets to the DNA level. And so that's nearing its completion of that project. We're doing it every day here at White Labs. We have things like, so we have things like quality. We're going to be having higher a lot of things focused on the yeast itself, the yeast cell. We want to make a great cell. We want to deliver it in the easy to use format. We want it to have long shelf life, and we want to give a high pitching rate. So that's been a lot of those different teams that you're going to see a lot of things in 2021. And then things like website, things like our experience for the White Labs Brewing Company with the San Diego Tap Room and the Kitchen and Tap in Asheville. With our tap room being closed a lot of only for to go in 2020 in San Diego, we've been working behind the scenes doing a new draft tower that has new technology to make our long draw system bring fresher beer to the taps, putting some food in, putting a outside permanent deck in, doing those things in Asheville as well, even while minimizing the menu in Asheville because you can't run a restaurant like you did before right now, but making that experience great. And the beers that we're making often we haven't been able to really share that information with our yeast community. Since we've had the brewery since 2012, you as a yeast user, what are you getting from that? Can you go look up, hey, I want to see all those fermentations with WLP 001 versus 008 in the tabbers. Well, that's hard for us to pull up internally. We're going to make that super easy for everybody to find and find more yeast information based on our brewing, find more food information based on our uses of yeast and food.
So it all obviously ties back to yeast and fermentation, right? It's, fermentation contributes a lot to some of our favorite consumables or food and beverages, and we've done a lot to kind of dabble in a lot of that. We've been propagating yeast. Our yeast has been propagated in a very similar fashion for a long time, right? Over 100 years. But it seems like in the last 25 years of white labs, every 5 years, every 10 years, and in more recent time, every year or two, we're always striving to improve it from that 99th percentile to that 99.1 to that 99.2 in quality. What drives that passion for always trying to increase that quality, just that little finite amount?
I think that's accepting change and improvement, and you got to keep improving. If somebody tells me, something happens sometimes at a brewery, like I never change that recipe, I say, ooh, that's not actually a good thing, because who does change? The consumers, right? And competition. There's more competition in yeast now. That's a good thing. It drives improvements. Just like when I came on in 25 years ago with White Labs, that led to an improvement in liquid yeast. That's what competition does. It keeps you pushing forward, improving. What can you do better? You don't want to just say, oh, this is already great. Oh, well, no, that's kind of boring. Make it better, make it more, make it easier. And it really comes down to the people using, that word consumers, right? They're usually the ones driving that, and when competition, they have more choices. So whether you're home brewers or, professional brewers or winemakers or kombucha makers, you're looking to make your things the best. So you want the ingredients to keep improving.
And what are some ways that we're working on to constantly improve the quality, specifically talking about yeast?
Eric, it's kind of funny, right? I mean, we work on that every single day. You see it all around you. And the funny thing about the tap room in San Diego, that's kind of the one place in our facilities. There's different buildings, but you hear everything. So I hear from the staff when the tap room's open, like they're the ones that sort of know, okay, somebody's working on this thing with yeast. Somebody's working on this thing with a box. Somebody's working on this and that and this. Someone's doing a home brew, because all the staff kind of comes through that tap room. And it's hard to share all that every day, but or every once in a while. But we work on those things every day to make a great yeast cell. We just had a meeting on glycogen, right? So we have this big study where we're looking at the glycogen, the internal carbohydrate storage in yeast, and we're measuring. We have a new assay that we're measuring across all of our strains, across all of the reactors as we're producing the yeast, and we're looking at glycogen changes per strain and per this new way we're going to bring yeast to people in 2021. But also that gives you a longer shelf life. It gives you a better fermentation, and that's just one little detail that we have been working on, and we work on to make the yeast better.
Yeah, I think it's often to overlook a lot of those successes on improving a box or improving a shipping window, and those tend to not be the improvements that are really sexy, so they aren't as transparent often. But the things that I get most excited about is shortening a shipping window for something, when all of a sudden we're going from 2 months to 1 month as the acceptable shipping window. Like that's a huge step in the right direction, and that's a huge win that takes a lot to go into it. It doesn't seem like changing the insulation of a box would take a lot of work, but when you see how much work these different departments put into it, and how much R&D goes into it, and how many trials and how much beta testing to change the insulation of a box, almost seems ridiculous when you say it out loud, but it's all part of improving quality. And I think we've had a lot of those wins this year.
Yeah, if we could make a box of yeast arrive better in Korea or Australia, it's going to arrive better in Nebraska and Toronto and places closer to San Diego and Asheville. And same thing with Copenhagen. So the improvements we make to make long travel work help with small travel. And it's all about making that yeast better. I want people, when they use the yeast, to realize, because yeast is just not yeast. There's different, as I said, competitors, but It's a cell. That cell has to be made the right way. It has to be made fresh. So we have small batches every single day, 7 days a week. So we can make not just a big batch that we package off throughout the month. That's what we sell that day, and have a lot of transparency around it with our dates. And I want to deliver that that consistency with the yeast, and people have great fermentations. And so if people say, oh, you have less yeast than other people, well, we'll make a bigger package. No big deal. We'll give you more yeast that has that great cell. And so those are the kind of things we work towards.
There's been a lot of reflection this year. This was supposed to be a pretty big year for the company. Being 25 years, we had a lot of pretty awesome things planned, which hopefully some of it can come to fruition next year. But could you just recap maybe how it is for you looking back in the last 25 years, and even looking at some of these pictures, how far we've come then? Again, like looking 25 years ago, it's still brewer's yeast, but looking at it now, it's a completely different, like it's utilized completely differently. The strains we sell are completely different. The quality is completely different. Maybe you can touch on what that journey's been like, and what you're excited to see moving forward.
Yeah, some things are very different. Some things are very similar. It was always about yeast. It was always about a thorough, long process to make the yeast from a petri dish. So that 21-day process with testing it, complete testing at the end hasn't changed. What gets put in a package is a bit different. The number of strains are different. The way the brewers use them is different. We were looking at something the other day of this brewery using a yeast, and he pitches his yeast at 64 degrees Fahrenheit, and 25 years ago everybody did 68. Small difference, but a lot of people like to ferment cooler these days, which requires a different amount of yeast and really, really good quality yeast to go into that fermentation. But 25 years ago, we started with making yeast for home brewers. Pizza Port in San Diego, just one location started using the yeast. There was a couple others that started at the same time, but they're the ones that kind of really started using it. And I'm going visit a brewery with that Vince Marsalia tomorrow, so we're still friends. And so some things change, some things don't change. But we put the yeast in some flexible packaging in the beginning, then it came bottles, and we're back to flexible. I was home brewing a lot then. Now I own a brewery, so we're still brewing a lot, and we're still we just care about great beer. We want great cells to make great beer, and that's been the driving force of the company. Even though as we start our own brewery, it's about talking about yeast. As we start our analytical lab, it's about making sure the beers are great from a testing perspective, education that Eric's involved in, and all the little facets are really about making great beer.
So before we get to 2021, there's a pretty awesome comment from Thomas that they just started a homebrew shop in Lithuania a few months ago, and they purchased some of our yeast to sell online in their shop, and just wanted to thank you for providing that. And that's pretty cool to see.
That's great. Thanks. Yeah, 2021. I mean, I think we're excited at White Labs because we do. I mean, I'm optimistic. This is going to go away for the most part. Even if we have to make new vaccines, testing would help. But I think, I think a lot of people are probably hearing something similar. Like I've heard this a lot from other people. We've spent this time building a better company. And that's what we've done as well. And so we're looking forward to sharing a lot of these things in 2021 and beyond with, the beers, the education, but the yeast itself. It's going to be easier to use. We've spent a lot of time perfecting pure pitch. We have pure pitch, we have vials, we have other things, but it's all going to be in a really easy to use format, putting some innovation around pure pitch. So look for that as we're already beta testing with customers since before Thanksgiving with this new pure pitch yeast in a easier to use system, and seeing great results. So we're looking forward to getting into that in the homebrew and pro series of all of our yeast in 2021.
That's going to be pretty awesome, and excited to talk about it in more detail, hopefully soon. Yeah, we're going to continue this webcast series. January, we've got Mitch Steele coming on to talk about how fermentation and utilizing different yeast strains and some of that technology has influenced the India Pale Ale over the last couple centuries. So that'll be pretty fun. We've got a bunch of other cool ones on the books that we're going to be putting out once a month. We're still looking at the third Wednesday, but as I mentioned, all of this is available on our YouTube channel too after the fact. So if you can't make it live, make sure you check it out. There's a lot of cool content. We're excited to do more canning runs and just, keep moving forward and keep things accessible. So if you're not located in San Diego or you're not in North Carolina or Copenhagen, to still be able to have access to a lot of the fun projects we're working on and a lot of the cool information out there. I mean, we're always learning too. So, I always find it interesting when we come out with a new white paper on something where people assume that's what we should have already known. And it's like, I would much rather work for and work with a company that is always learning and is transparent about that and trying to make things better. And I think this year was a pretty good example of that.
Yep.
Cool. We've got a couple random questions. So if anybody has any questions that they want to ask related to what we're talking about, or just a general Q&A, I did want to thank everybody for taking time today to listen to us and chiming in and for being engaging. But, it seems like after doing about 15 of these webcasts throughout the year, Kvike's still the number one talked about news in the fermentation community. But the question on here is that there's a big concern of Kvike cultures going extinct. Do you store the entirety of the sample you get, or basically just to reword it a little bit, is there any concern that Kvike's going to continue to change or maybe not be found in its native environments anymore? Or is it all going to be lab grown, or are we going to see some of these farmhouses still nurturing their cultures as they've done for a couple hundred years?
Complicated question. Because there's advantages to what's happened in the wild and in nature and leading to this change, but somebody's got to capture it and store it, right? And so White Labs from the beginning was really set up as a microbiology lab with -80 freezes of strains so they never change, checking for mutation, starting everything from a petri dish, separating the strains. And so, as I mentioned, different competitors start, but sometimes they don't start from that petri dish. They don't have those freezes. A good indication of that is, I can, if somebody can get you a yeast in a few days, well, where's the part of the process for the petri dish? Where's the part of the process for the testing? Where's the lab part? So we've always maintained that real lab scale laboratory microbiology component where we have we spend a lot of time getting the yeast in the permanent freezes. We have people that maintain the freezes. We have work on the petri dishes. We get into the small scale cultures, and then work those up. And then once we're done in 20 days, we don't keep it going. That's it. We already have more coming out from petri dishes every day. And so I feel that we'll be able to maintain these Kvike yeasts that we have forever and keep getting new ones. The strains that we've had for 25 years of these freezers are the same in these freezers. And that's been kind of nice, but it does take a lot of effort. It does take a lot of work and investment. So we'll keep doing that. And, we usually separate strains into different freezes. And if we want to combine them together, we'll do that from a manufacturing standpoint, production standpoint, but we'll keep them separate as freezes because that gives you the control to keep that strain permanent.
Yeah, there was a great podcast on the Master Brewers Association of America's podcast on the Guinness yeast and looking at their yeast bank and, looking at some of these strains from decades ago and comparing it to the strains they use currently and thinking that they were going to find a lot of genetic drift. But what they really ended up seeing was, a lot of these microbiological techniques that were in practice 100 years ago were actually pretty suitable for what they were doing and it's storing pretty genetically stable strains. A couple other questions. Are there any indications when particular yeast can be from the vault can be available? Yeah, there's different color icons on the strains. If you go to yeastman.com, if it's available or in production, you'll see a green block that's open. But you can also kind of gauge it by the amount of pre-orders there are. We're doing it a couple different ways now where if there's excess yeast, if there's a professional order or we're propagating something specific and we have some left over, we'll actually throw it into some homebrew now and ship it out. So what that's done is allows homebrewers and retailers to get access to these strains a little bit quicker than waiting strictly just for the minimum to be hit. John asked, is there anything down the road for ancient yeast strains? So are there any other cool types of yeast strains or historic strains that you expect the industry to kind of move towards or some of our production specifically?
I think that's where the community knows way more than we do, and we love that. We're looking for what people want, collecting, storing, changing if necessary. But White Labs would have never created this kind of yeast variety without the community. People using yeast, people searching for yeast, people wanting different yeast, and I think that's what's going to continue. And if it's ancient strains, awesome. We've got a lot of ancient strains in our bank, and there's ancient strains still out in the world. If people want to use them and find interesting ways to use them, I think that's awesome.
So we're going to end it with the question we all love, and I feel like most of these webcasts end with a question about a yeast starter, right? So for homebrewers harvesting from starters, how many generations before you might see problems? What are some potential issues? They've heard problems and utilizing stir plates. If you have any advice on just generally creating a starter, what somebody could expect, and if they should continue to reuse that yeast or should they start from a lab-grown culture?
That's a big topic, Eric.
I know.
We got an hour.
There's somebody wrote a book on that. I know the guy. I'll put it in the comments.
I mentioned a few things. I mean, one reason, why are we doing starters? Well, we're doing them because we want a lot of cells and we want a high viability. So if you look at what's out there now, there's in the homebrewing world, for example, a range of different amounts from 100 billion to 200 billion. But almost every beer you make, if you went to a calculator, it would say to make a starter. Because even a 200 billion, that'd work for a 12 Plato beer, according to a calculator. So, you got to kind of weigh your own. These calculators that are out there are great, but they do put you on a pretty high level of yeast. And then they also, a lot of them have a viability button that's completely a guess. So, and I can recognize this now. I didn't really realize it for a time, but somebody will say, "Hey, I got your yeast at 72% viable." I say, "How did you do that?" So I need to make a starter, right? It's 70% viable. And I know now that comes from a calculator, but that's not our data, right? To really know the viability, that's some experiments from a while ago, and they're fine experiments, but it's not our yeast. So often we have our own calculator. Maybe we'll publish it at some point. That's still a generalization of years of data, but if somebody tells me 72%, our calculator might say 94%. So then, is that the question of making a starter or not? The best way to do a viability is have a microscope, put it under the microscope. Otherwise everything's a guess, an average based on some experiments. But viability itself and cell count itself are not the same scientific measurement as weight and volume and things like that. They're a minute sample, even when you do it under the microscope, that gives you a representation of the culture. Okay, so that being said, you want to make a starter. Not that big a deal. You put it in some in a high volume of work, right, and it grows up. Put it on a stir plate or not. There's like 1,000 questions about starters, and most of them don't really matter. The fact you do a starter is cool. If you want to, the yeast gets some metabolism. Whether it's stir plate, whether it's not stir plate, whether it's 1.3 liters or versus 1.1 liters, is not as critical as many people think. And I think I did make a big deal, that really point in the book. So sometimes some things from the book were taken a certain way. And I've sort of noticed that now, like maybe I didn't make as big a deal that these are generalizations. Every strain's will be different, everything, because you actually got to measure it to really know. And so whether it grows a little bit more here or there and you do a cell count, remember the next time you do a cell count, it's going to be a little different because it's a different part of that sample. So there are benefits from a biological standpoint of doing a starter. There's nothing wrong with it if you don't introduce contamination. But some of the details we talk about are actually not that critical.
So to simplify it, starter or no starter?
Oh, I like microbiology. I have no problems with starters. That's, but again, if you go buy a calculator, if you want to go buy a calculator, that's going to give you consistency. So it doesn't matter if you buy 100 billion or 200 billion or 250 billion. Most times, if you use a calculator, it's still going to stay to do a little starter. In my own home brewing, do I make a starter? No, but I like them. So I'm not really going to give you an answer, Eric.
It depends. We like saying that a lot. Yeah.
It depends. But here's the thing you should really do. Experiment, right? Don't just take my word for it or somebody else's word for it. Starter, no starter. Make one with starter one time. Make one without a starter one time. Do a sensory. Look at the fermentation kinetics. Decide for yourself. That would be my best advice and experiment.
That's fair.
The fun of
that's the fun of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you wanted to recap before we give our goodbyes here?
No, I enjoyed doing another one of these. I hope to do more. It's fun to talk to everybody. I wish I could see people, but we're getting used to it, and we're going to enjoy things even more in person when we're doing it the way we used to. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, we definitely appreciate everybody taking time today and spending a lot of time with us over the last 9 months, the last year, and the last 25 years. Chris, I want to thank you for taking time today to chat about it a little bit. I think it's something that we do internally a lot with a lot of our meetings and a lot of our all hands staff meetings, but I think it's cool to kind of recap some of our, successes for the year with all of our, partners in this industry, and whether it's somebody that homebrews, a beer geek, or a professional brewer, we're all in the same boat, and we all have been. And there are some positives to what's been going on, and just making the most of the situation at hand. So thanks for taking time today to share that with everybody.
Thanks, Eric.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Cheers.